everybody, welcome back to the shop. In this video we're going to be taking apart the transmission and seeing what's going on in there. Appreciate everyone coming back and joining me for the second part. Let's get started. Here we are on the bench. It's actually the next day. After I got everything out of the car, I said, you know what, taking the rest of the night off. Just got this one last motor mount left over here. We'll whip that off quick, and then we're gonna get started on stuff. According to the internet, there's a little bolt that I gotta pull out, and that's so it disconnects some of the linkage inside. So I'll grab that, and then these little hex-headed deals. There's one here, and then there's two smaller ones right here. So it's down here, up here, and then two small ones here, one over here. They're little detent, like spring deals. We're still in surprise mode. Like the fact that the car would roll forward and then lock up completely at some point kind of tells me that there's something really wrong in there. But we'll see. So let me start whipping some of these parts off. I'm going to show you this. Some of the residual fluid came out. If your transmission fluid looks like that, that's not a good sign. All right, everybody, let's pray. Oh yeah, bits of gears falling out. That's ugly. And it looks like the back of the case is chowdered up. There's lots of bits everywhere. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what's left of that bearing. It's exactly what I thought. And this is all gonna have to come apart. Maybe I'll put a photo here on the screen of what this is supposed to look like, but there's a radial bearing here that's supposed to be here. We can still see the inner race right here if you look really close. This is where all the balls were. So you had like this big outer part, and it would seat in the back of the case here. I don't know if you guys can see down in there, but it seats right in here. Now I'm looking at this, and it don't look good. There's also supposed to be a shim. I don't know if that's our shim that's all smashed up in there, but it looks like it saw some pressure, so I don't even know if I'll be able to reuse this case. At minimum, we'll have to get a thicker shim to go in there to preload it better. Boy, lots and lots of bits. I've kind of gotten everything out. I'm not seeing any missing teeth. There's a lot of little fragments of bearing material in here. The part that I'm the most concerned about is, see if I can zoom in, right here, this section. At first it looked worse than that. That's because there's a shim that was in there and the shim got mangled. I've seen pictures online of stuff gnarred up worse than that, and they were putting it back together. I'm sure any transmission person watching this is like, no, this whole thing is done. I'm sure it is. I don't know. I might risk it. I don't have really much into this, so I already removed a lot of stuff. There was piles of material, and I'll get to that in a second. This is where the magnet is, and the magnet had attracted a bunch of it, but there's just piles of it all up in here. So anyway, that's all the big parts in here, and then here's all the carnage. It's all the balls left from the bearing. Let's get a light over here so you can see. You can see the balls aren't even shaped round anymore. This thing here is the shim that was on the back side. The shim might have saved the case from further damage. Here's what's left of the snap ring, so we'll have to get a new snap ring. And then this is all outer race material from the bearing that gave it up. And then that's all the stuff that was piled up by the magnet. Here's the magnet, still needs to be cleaned off more. I just kind of wiped it. We'll start cleaning everything up and seeing how good we do. Okay, got everything cleaned up out of the solvent tank. It's actually been sitting out and drying, so everything's nice and tidy. I got the input shaft behind me. I'll show you that in a second. This is the case. This is the back part of the transmission, and then down in here, you can see that's that section I was concerned about, all cleaned up. You know, all things considered, I think it could have gotten gnarred up a lot worse. I think we're in decent shape. I'm sitting here looking at these bearing races for the tapered bearings, and I'm not really seeing any hard wear on those. I'm probably just going to reuse them. This part was very challenging to get cleaned out. You've got all these little splash things, I think, that are made to kind of maximize the splashing of the oil in here. Turn this thing around. And like you've got this little shelf. So the way that we're looking at it right now is this would be the bottom of the transmission. So you got to imagine things are spinning in here and slinging oil up. And it looks like it gets up on this little tray, runs to the back, and or is just kind of fed, kind of moved around over here. Then you've got another shelf over here where it's slung up on here, and then it's falling into the back through this little channel, and then into that plastic funnel I mentioned earlier, and then it gets sent down the center of the input shaft. This one here, this little splash thingy or whatever they're using, it's riveted in, so I couldn't figure out how to take that out, but there was a lot of pieces of bearing race material, like the outer race, stuck back behind here. I probably spent, I don't know, an hour with just various items getting in there to push things out, blow it out with the air compressor, look down there with a light and a magnifying glass, and just spent a long time just in this little section getting every possible thing out of there and making sure there's nothing left back there. When I was flipping this back and forth in the solvent tank, I could hear something rattling, and I was wondering. Also back behind this, there's a little cavity there, not very deep, but got back in there and cleaned all that out. So that's the back of the case. This is the bell housing part. I went ahead and cleaned all that up. Really wasn't a lot of stuff in here except for what I had already told you about earlier that was piled up in this section. So I mostly just cleaned everything, but nothing in here is really chowdered up. Again, here's another tapered bearing race. It looks okay. I'm not really seeing any issues with that. I spent some time getting back behind more of these little splash things to try to get everything cleaned out. It was really interesting. I don't know if you'll catch it in the video of me washing it, but literally both this and the case, I would fill it up with solvent, scrubbing everything, and then dump it out. And it was just, I probably did that 20 times for each side. And every time I dump, I just kept doing it until the solvent came out clear. But there was a lot of glitter and bearing material just kind of floating around in this thing. I'm not seeing any heavy wear or chips or anything weird in here. All these tapered bearings are great. They all spin fine. I went through each and every single one of these little rollers. I made sure was clean. I sat and spent time scrubbing those out, blasting them out with air. And I also went down inside both of these shafts because of the lubrication, just to make sure that we don't have anything blocking. Now over here, I've already got the input shaft set up here on the vise. You can see I haven't really messed with anything here. I did notice right here, I don't know if you guys can see that, there's a little bit of damage on the teeth right here of this gear. And then this one is chipped, but I did that. I came out here and I got all excited about getting my puller on here without even thinking about setting up the camera. They will tell you online, if you're following anyone online, you know, get some aluminum, which is why I have all these little bits of aluminum here, to put under here, because this is hardened steel, and when you start pulling up against it, it'll actually cause it to chip, and that's exactly what I did, because I don't know, I'm an idiot sometimes. So it is what it is. Right on top of this gear, smashed up against it, this is the inner race of that bearing that died. If I haven't already shown you, I'll put some B-roll on this of like what this is supposed to look like, what that bearing actually looks like on there. Right now, I kind of started to do a pull on this, which is why you can kind of see my puller is kind of grinding into my sockets that I have set up here. I think we're going to have to put some heat on this. It's not wanting to let go. I ended up having to take this whole input shaft to a local mechanic. He's actually just down the road from me, and have him pull the race that was left over on this. I tried everything. I mean, I watched all these YouTube videos where these guys were just using the 3-jaw pullers and just yanking them off of there. I could not get that done, and it just would not go. They put it in a press, knocked it off of there, and then just zip tied it to keep everything from falling off of here. Over here on the table, I got all of my replacement parts in from Toyota. I'll just kind of go over those real fast. First things first is this funnel piece. The funnel is what goes in the very back of the case. Got some new seals, got an input shaft seal. These are for the drive shafts or the axles. Here's your snap rings. I went ahead and got 3 different sizes of snap rings. The middle one should be the same thickness as what I have, and then I went one up and one down, just so when we're putting everything on there, I can make sure it's nice and solid. These are the shims. These go in the back of the case, so these sit actually on top of this funnel over here. And I got the middle one that's the same size as this, and then I went one up and one down. This is a 6th gear over here on the shaft. When I started trying to pull it, I actually chipped this gear pretty good. So I got that. I also got a new set of needle bearings. And then here, this is the new input shaft bearing. This is the one this is to replace the one that that blew up in there. This is the part number that Toyota gives as a replacement. Supposedly, it's supposed to be the fix. That's all of our parts to start putting some stuff together. All right, as you saw, pretty simple process. I gotta try to figure out how to put the snap ring on. I have a bunch of different kinds of snap ring pliers. I'm gonna have to dig around and look, but here's the original snap ring that came out. It didn't get too chewed up. It's got some garbage on it, but that's about it. And I just sort of like test fitted it, like slid it in here, and it feels like it goes in there good and solid, like maybe a little bit of play. So I think I'm gonna mess around with some of these and see which ones fit. I got some ring pliers for, you know, like your molly rings on your pistons. I got it started. Woo, she went right in. Nice, let's get a screwdriver. Yeah, she looks seated in there. That was the stock one. All right, I'm gonna do some studying and a little bit of math and conversion from millimeters to thousandths of an inch to figure out these shims next. But basically the shim just goes right here. That spaces it off the case, and then this little piece, this little funnel deal, it's going to go like that, and it all goes inside the transmission. So it looks kind of like that. So I just got to do some math to figure out which shim I want to put in there. And then we're going to be trying to figure out how to get all this mess back inside the case of the transmission and put it back together. Now we're just going to start working on getting all this put back together. I think I'm going to spend some time getting all the gears kind of meshed together and the shift forks put where they're supposed to be, and then one big unit, drop them into their spaces here so that everything's standing up, and we'll put the differential back in. My only concern here, and I'm sure this would be a concern of any professional transmission guy that might have run across this video for some reason, is the back of this case. Now this case, this whole thing here, costs about $800 from Toyota. And if you replace this case, that means that I'm going to have to spend a bunch of time. I have to go get a torquemeter and some other stuff so that I can measure the preloads on all these tapered bearings. On anything that you work on, if you see a tapered bearing like this, that means that there's going to be a preload associated with it. I already know that just from experience working with tapered bearings. I don't want to mess. The preloads were set from factory in here. The only thing that could cause a little hiccup would be, would be back here. But really, I only increased the shim by like a couple of thousandths, maybe about 4 to 6 thousandths, I think. Took me a while to do a bunch of math. I don't think it's going to really knock anything off kilter too much. But here's my primary concern, getting back to the case, is this area right down here. And this is the section where our new bearing that we just pressed on is going to rest in. You can see it's kind of gnarred up there from when the original bearing blew up in there. Now, I have test fitted everything in here, and it feels nice and solid. It slides into place like it should. It doesn't wobble around. Everything seems to lock into place. Now, I've seen online these be gnarred up way worse than this. I feel like I'm kind of fortunate in that the previous shims seem to take the brunt of this damage, but there is still damage there. Frankly, I just don't know how much this is going to affect the transmission, and this is what's kind of got me concerned. Again, when I test fitted it, it wasn't wobbling around or anything, and all the other parts snap into place like they should. I might spend some time with just some emery cloth, just kind of making sure that these surfaces that are facing us right now are smooth and there's nothing really sticking up that's going to kind of knock anything off kilter and cause it to wear out prematurely. I think it's enough yammering and yip yapping from me. I think I'm just going to get to work here, set up the camera, and we'll start getting this thing put back together. All right. Perfect. All right, that's the transmission put back together. It might have looked pretty easy, but I'll be honest with you, I practiced putting that case back on several times before I even put the sealant on there. There's a few little tricks to it. People online say, oh, there's a feel for it, and that's true. It's not that hard. It's just you should probably screw around with it a little bit before you drive it home, just so you can kind of feel how everything goes together. It'll be obvious, trust me, when you're doing it. You saw me doing something over here with these things and springs and stuff. These are your detents. They're just basically a spring with a little ball bearing on them. There's 3 small ones and 2 larger ones here. They're just hex head Allen key type plugs. I read online that these 3 are, the 3 small ones are interchangeable and the 2 larger ones are interchangeable, but I didn't even bother with that. I just took a paint marker and marked each one different colors and kept them all in corresponding bags. So that way the parts that I took out went right back where I got them. As far as dropping the case on, the shifter, I brought this all the way up to 12 o'clock, this big round part, this weight or whatever. I brought it up to 12 o'clock, and you have to have this pushed in. There's a little E-clip back here. You probably saw me installing that. You have to pull the E-clip out and then push this in when you pull the case off, and likewise, you got to do that in the reverse when you put it back down. So push it in, drop it down, do a bunch of shimmying and shaking to get all these jiggly bits up here to line up and go in. And then once you get it down there, you don't have to like try to do all this at once, by the way. I was thinking you had to slowly turn this while you're dropping the case down, all kinds of stupid stuff. Nope, it clears it just fine. Just hold it at 12 o'clock with it pushed in, drop it in, get all your case parts and everything lined up so that way it should drop down. Don't ever use these bolts to try to suck the case together. You'll just jack up stuff. It should drop all the way down. Once that's there, then you can start to rock this down, and as you're rocking it down, just start kind of pulling it out. You'll feel it slide and lock into place. You'll feel it like fall into the shift fork, and then you're good to go. So we got everything all torqued down, got all the detents put back in. Everything is complete. I already off camera ran it through all the gears to make sure. It feels good and tight, feels like it should. Something else I did off camera, before I put this together, I actually test fitted the input shaft with the new bearing and all the parts stuff into this part of the case that you saw that was kind of gnarred up. And then I went with a thicker shim. I'm sure that we lost a couple of thousandths on this when that bearing gave out. Like I said, the old shim, this bad boy here, I think probably gave its life to save our transmission case. It didn't really ding it up as bad as it could have. I've seen some really crazy pictures of the damage on these online. So I don't know. That's what I'm telling myself. I'm trying to convince myself that it's all going to be good. I'm sure transmission guys are like, yeah, I give it 15,000 miles. I don't know. We'll see. Who knows? I'm pretty satisfied with this. I think I got it as far as I can go without a full rebuild and a new case. That's it for the transmission. Next up, we're going to be shoving it back in the car. Once we get the transmission back in, I'm going to bring you back so that we can replace the wheel bearings. One more thing, the clutch. So I came to a decision with the clutch. I'm going to go ahead and just run it. Yeah, I'm this far, I should replace it, but here's my logic. I don't know how long that's going to last. And if I go and buy a $300 clutch kit and throw it in the car, and then this transmission garage sells itself, I'm going to be pretty irritated because then I'm going to have a brand new clutch in there and no transmission. I'd rather just wait and see how this does. And then if I got to pull this transmission back out to replace this clutch later, then I guess that's what I got to do. But for now, I think I'm just going to keep the clutch just as janky as the transmission. And we'll run it like that, see how long it goes. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Stop yammering. I got lots to do. Hang in there. All right, made a lot of progress here. We got everything installed, some frames installed, everything's tight. I went around off camera, nut and bolted everything, just make sure that everything's tight. So we're back out here on the steering hub assembly. We need to replace these worn out wheel bearings here. I just wanted to kind of cover a couple of things here for folks that aren't familiar with wheel bearings. Now, wheel bearings nowadays are doing a lot more than they used to. This ain't your dad's tapered wheel bearing and hub assembly. It's all self-contained in one big hub thing now. They're sealed bearings. Once those bearings go bad, the entire unit is bad, so you got to replace the whole thing. But something else kind of special with most wheel bearings on modern cars, you see it on Toyotas, newer GMs, I think pretty much almost everything has some kind of wheel speed sensor built into the hub assembly here. So what you gotta watch out for is, I don't know if anyone can see it, and maybe in editing I'll zoom in for you, but there's a little sensor here sticking out. It screws in from the back over here and pokes through. It's a Hall effect sensor, and it's reading the magnet. So as this thing's turning, so I'm gonna get you some light. As this thing's turning, it's sensing on the magnet. Now that sensor is doing a few things. It's not just telling your speedometer how fast you're going. It's also taking measurements for your ABS system. If you think about how an ABS system works, it needs to sense when your wheels are spinning and when they're not. When you smash on the brake, if you've ever been driving and you gotten into the ABS, usually it makes kind of like a bonk noise, you know, it's kind of a shaking, and that's this wheel speed sensor telling the computer it's turning, now it's not, stop, you know, it's like kind of grabbing it, just kind of makes the brakes kind of flutter until it gets you stopped in the most efficient way possible. It's the electronic version of the old school pump on your brakes kind of system, and that's what's in there. The point of me talking about all of that is when we go to pull this out of here, we need to be really careful about that sensor. I might try to get back here and undo it. The problem is there's a lot of corrosion back here, and sometimes just trying to get it out will break it. And I don't know that I necessarily need to, so I'm just going to try to leave it until it becomes apparent that I need to remove it. These types of wheel bearings, let me see if I can undo it here so I can show you the front. They're a real common type, but they have the 4 bolts in the back, and what we got to do is knock this flange off of here. Sometimes you just unbolt it and they just slide right off, they just come off, the bolts are holding them. But most of the time it's almost like a press fit into the knuckle here, and it requires some pounding. I've had some success in getting all the bolts out and then just hitting it with the air hammer on these ears back and forth and kind of get it moving, and then it should come out. It just builds up corrosion in there. So sit tight. I'll knock this one off here and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's air hammer time. Let's see how this is going to go. Whew. She is stuck. All right, inevitably this always happens, but just because I've got the camera and everything's how I want it, that's when it's going to be a huge hellacious fight, like one you've never seen before. I had to try a lot of different things to get that off of there. I tried knocking a stud out and pushing on it here, but that just stripped the threads off of the piece of all thread I was using. I used the air hammer. I actually ended up pulling the speed sensor out here. End of the day, BFH. You got about a 10-pound sledge. I just started smacking it here, 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 and then mostly from this direction here. This is kind of like a press fit in there. So this is held up like that, and then this slides in there. And you can see you've got this outer edge, and that goes in here. And I'm sure you can see all that, but there's a bunch of corrosion in here. Before we get the new ones in, I'm going to go ahead and clean this up real good. corrosion protection in here. All right, let's check out them new ones. Okay, got you over here on the bench, showing you the replacement wheel bearing hub assemblies for this car. These are just some ones I got off of Amazon, A premium, and yeah, it's made in China. If you want to know that this is going to last for you a long time, get OEM stuff. But I think the OEMs are like 150 a piece, and I got the whole set for 100. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I've used A premium stuff on my other cars and not really had any issues yet. I'm just going to roll with it. Plus, this kind of sticks with the janky scheme of what we're doing with this project anyway. So pretty simple. Most of these, when you order them, they come with everything that you need in the box. You got your wheel bearing hub assembly. We'll get to that in a sec. And comes with a new axle nut. Pretty cool that they include that, especially in our case, since our car only came with one axle nut that wasn't even installed correctly. If I could get that open, I'd show you. But anyway, that's the spare axle nut. And then get this thing open here. And you can see it's just everything you need. Wheel studs are already installed. Nice tight bearing. You got your magnet on the back for your speed sensor. What else is there to say? We'll just slap it in, throw the bolts in, move on with our day. All right. That's 159. There we go. Okay, I decided to go ahead and take it out for its first spin. I already drove it down the road a little ways. The dust shield on the driver's side for the back of the brake was rubbing, so I reached in there and bent it out. That seems to have solved it. So far, it seems like it's driving pretty good. Even when you're in neutral with the clutch out, I can't hear any noise like I did before. Before it was making a horrific grinding noise and everything. That's gone now. Sitting here idling, I don't hear any noise. Now I'm seeing a bunch of stuff in here. I guess if I was able to test drive this and not just hurrying to buy it at night for as cheap as possible, I would have noticed that the speedometer is Canadian. So I've got a speedometer that's in kilometers with the miles per hour in the middle. Not that big of a deal, but it's a good driving car so far. I mean, it goes in reverse. I got all 6 gears. They shift in nice and smooth. I'm not really having any issues. So let's take it for a spin. You can hear for yourself. Also, the check engine light came on. I'm going to have to investigate that. Roll it up and just go silent, and we can listen to the car together. Well, I think that's it. The odometer in this thing says it is 199991. And I'm guessing that's kilometers, so I'll have to get out my phone and figure out what that is in miles. Alrighty. I guess that's going to do it for this video. I really appreciate everyone hanging out and watching. We'll catch you on the next one.